Welcome back to the shadows, where the darkness whispers secrets that most people never live to tell. I'm your host, and this is Mr. Shadow's Stories, your gateway to the most terrifying true tales that lurk in the corners of our reality. Tonight, we're entering the dimly lit corridors of nursing homes during the graveyard shift, where the line between life and death grows dangerously thin, where nurses and caregivers witness things that medical textbooks can't explain, where the dying sometimes see visitors that no one else can, or at least no one living. What you're about to hear are 4 genuine accounts from real night shift nurses who encountered the paranormal in the most vulnerable hours of the night. These aren't Hollywood fantasies. These are the stories they tried to forget but couldn't. The experiences that made them question everything they thought they knew about death and what comes after. So turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and whatever you do, don't listen to this alone, because once you step into these shadows, something might just follow you out. Let's begin. Story 1. The Woman in Room 237. Our first story comes from a registered nurse named Sarah Mitchell, who worked the night shift at Meadowbrook Extended Care Facility in rural Pennsylvania for 7 years. Sarah had seen countless patients pass away during her career. It was an unavoidable part of working in geriatric care. But nothing in her nursing training prepared her for what happened during 3 consecutive nights in October 2019. It started on a Tuesday evening. Sarah clocked in at 10 p.m. as usual and received the handoff report from the day shift nurse. Everything seemed routine. 23 residents were accounted for, medications were logged, and the building was settling into its typical nighttime quiet. Room 237 had been vacant for 2 weeks since its previous occupant, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Around 2:30 a.m., Sarah was making her rounds, checking on residents and ensuring everyone was comfortable. The hallways were dark except for the dim emergency lighting along the baseboards, creating long shadows that stretched across the linoleum floors. As she walked past room 237, she noticed something that made her stop dead in her tracks. The door was slightly ajar. She knew for a fact that housekeeping always kept vacant rooms locked after cleaning them. Sarah's heart began to race as she slowly pushed the door open, her hand instinctively reaching for her phone to call security. The room was dark, but the moonlight streaming through the window illuminated just enough for Sarah to see what was inside. Sitting in the old recliner chair in the corner, the same chair where Mrs. Hartley used to sit every evening, was the figure of an elderly woman. She was wearing a pale blue nightgown and appeared to be staring directly at the door, directly to Sarah. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her training kicked in, and she quickly flipped on the light switch. The room was flooded with harsh fluorescent light, and the chair was empty, completely empty. Sarah stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing to rationalize what she'd just seen. A trick of the light? Are her tired eyes playing games after years of night shifts? She checked the room thoroughly. The closet, the bathroom, under the bed, nothing. The room was vacant, just as it should have been. Shaken, but trying to maintain her composure, Sarah locked the door firmly behind her and continued her rounds. She didn't mention the incident to anyone, convincing herself it was just exhaustion. But the next night, it happened again. At approximately 2:30 a.m., just on time, Sarah was passing through the hallway when she noticed room 237's door was open once more. This time, she hadn't just seen the door open, she had heard it. The distinct sound of the door handle turning, followed by the quiet creak of hinges, echoed through the silent corridor. Sarah's entire body went cold. She knew that the door had been locked. She had personally checked it multiple times throughout her shift, even testing the handle to make sure it was secure. There was no logical explanation for it to be open. Taking a deep breath, Sarah approached the room more cautiously this time. As she got closer, she heard something that made her blood run cold. The sound of humming. It was soft, melodic, and unmistakably the voice of an elderly woman. The tune was familiar, too. It was "You Are My Sunshine," the same song Mrs. Hartley used to hum every evening before bed. Sarah peeked around the doorframe, and there she was again, the woman in the blue nightgown, sitting in the recliner, humming peacefully as if she belonged there. But this time, the woman's head slowly turned toward the door, toward Sarah. And when their eyes met, the figure smiled, not a warm smile, but something hollow and unsettling that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello, dear," the figure said in a raspy whisper that sounded like it came from a great distance. "I haven't seen my daughter. She promised to visit tonight." Sarah stumbled backwards, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran to the nurse's station and called security immediately. 2 guards arrived within minutes and searched room 237 thoroughly. They found nothing. No woman, no open door, no sign that anyone had been there. The door was locked just as Sarah had left it the night before. The security guards exchanged skeptical glances, clearly thinking Sarah was either pranking them or needed some time off. But Sarah knew what she had seen. More importantly, she knew what she had heard, that voice, those words. The guards left, and Sarah was alone again with the knowledge that something impossible was happening in room 237. On the 3rd night, Sarah almost called in sick. She seriously considered abandoning her shift and never returning. But she was a professional, and she had patients who depended on her. She couldn't let fear control her life. So she showed up, clocked in, and tried to pretend everything was normal. At 2:30 a.m., like clockwork, Sarah heard the door handle of room 237 turning. But this time, she didn't investigate alone. She grabbed her colleague, Marcus, a nursing assistant who had worked at Meadowbrook even longer than she had, and explained what had been happening. Marcus was skeptical, but agreed to accompany her. Together, they approached room 237. The door was wide open, and the humming had returned, louder this time, more insistent. As they peered into the room, both of them saw her, the woman in the blue nightgown, sitting in the recliner, humming peacefully as if she belonged there. But this time, the woman's head slowly turned toward the door, toward Sarah. And when their eyes met, the figure smiled, not a warm smile, but something hollow and unsettling that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hello, dear," the figure said in a raspy whisper that sounded like it came from a great distance. "I haven't seen my daughter. She promised to visit tonight." Sarah stumbled backwards, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran to the nurse's station and called security immediately. 2 guards arrived within minutes and searched room 237 thoroughly. They found nothing. No woman, no open door, no sign that anyone had been there. The door was locked just as Sarah had left it the night before. The security guards exchanged skeptical glances, clearly thinking Sarah was either pranking them or needed some time off. But Sarah knew what she had seen. More importantly, she knew what she had heard, that voice, those words. The guards left, and Sarah was alone again with the knowledge that something impossible was happening in room 237. On the 3rd night, Sarah almost called in sick. She seriously considered abandoning her shift and never returning. But she was a professional, and she had patients who depended on her. She couldn't let fear control her life. So she showed up, clocked in, and tried to pretend everything was normal. At 2:30 a.m., like clockwork, Sarah heard the door handle of room 237 turning, but this time she didn't investigate alone. She grabbed her colleague, Marcus, a nursing assistant who had worked at Meadowbrook even longer than she had, and explained what had been happening. Marcus was skeptical, but agreed to accompany her. Together, they approached room 237. The door was wide open, and the humming had returned, louder this time, more insistent. As they peered into the room, both of them saw her, the woman in the blue nightgown, sitting in the recliner, humming peacefully as if she belonged there. But this time, the woman's head slowly turned toward the door, toward Sarah. And when their eyes met, the figure smiled, not a warm smile, but something hollow and unsettling that didn't quite reach her eyes.
"Hello, dear," the figure said in a raspy whisper that sounded like it came from a great distance. "Have you seen my daughter? She promised to visit tonight." Sarah stumbled backward, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She ran to the nurse's station and called security immediately. 2 guards arrived within minutes and searched room 237 thoroughly. They found nothing. No woman, no open door, no sign that anyone had been there. The door was locked, just as Sarah had left it the night before. The security guards exchanged skeptical glances, clearly thinking Sarah was either pranking them or needed some time off. But Sarah knew what she had seen. More importantly, she knew what she had heard. That voice, those words. The guards left, and Sarah was alone again with the knowledge that something impossible was happening in room 237. On the 3rd night, Sarah almost called in sick. She seriously considered abandoning her shift and never returning. But she was a professional, and she had patients who depended on her. She couldn't let fear control her life. So she showed up, clocked in, and tried to pretend everything was normal. At 2:30 a.m., like clockwork, Sarah heard the door handle of room 237 turning. But this time, she didn't investigate alone. She grabbed her colleague, Marcus, a nursing assistant who had worked at Meadowbrook even longer than she had, and explained what had been happening. Marcus was skeptical, but agreed to accompany her. Together, they approached room 237. The door was wide open, and the humming had returned, louder this time, more insistent. As they peered into the room, both of them saw her, the woman in the blue nightgown, sitting in the recliner, rocking slowly back and forth, humming that same haunting tune. Marcus gasped, his face draining of color. That's Mrs. Hartley," he whispered. "But that's impossible. I was here the night she died. I helped prepare her body for the funeral home." The figure stopped humming and stood up from the chair. She moved with an unnatural stillness, as if she were gliding rather than walking. She approached them slowly, her pale face illuminated by the hallway light, her eyes fixed on something beyond them, or perhaps beyond this world entirely. "My daughter never came," the figure said, her voice filled with an unbearable sadness. "She promised me. She promised." Sarah found her voice, though it trembled with fear. "Mrs. Hartley, your daughter did come. She was here. She held your hand when you passed. She said goodbye." The figure stopped moving. For a moment, something like recognition flickered across her translucent features. A single tear rolled down her cheek, catching the light like a diamond. "She was here?" the spirit whispered. I don't remember." "Yes," Sarah said softly, tears now streaming down her own face. "She loved you very much. She told you it was okay to let go. And you did. You can rest now, Mrs. Hartley. You can go." The figure stood still for what felt like an eternity.
Then, slowly, she smiled, this time a genuine smile, full of peace and relief. The air in the room seemed to shift, becoming lighter, warmer, and then, like smoke dissipating in the wind, she faded away. The recliner sat empty once more. Room 237 has remained undisturbed ever since. Sarah later learned from Mrs. Hartley's daughter that Eleanor had been in the early stages of dementia before her death and had been terribly worried that her daughter wouldn't be able to visit her in her final hours. The daughter had, in fact, been there, but Eleanor's declining mental state meant she couldn't always hold on to memories, even the most important ones. Sometimes the dead remain not because they're angry or vengeful, but because they're confused, lost, waiting for a piece of closure they don't remember receiving. And sometimes it takes a living soul brave enough to remind them that it's okay to move on.
Story 2: The Hallway Visitor. Our second story takes us to St. Augustine's Senior Living Center in Louisiana, where night shift nurse Thomas Crawford experienced something that made him question the very nature of reality. Thomas had been working nights for 3 years and considered himself unshakable. He dealt with medical emergencies, difficult patients, and the inevitable passings that came with geriatric care. Nothing fazed him anymore, or so he thought. It was a humid August night when Thomas first saw the man in the hallway. He was making his 3 a.m. rounds, pushing his medication cart from room to room, when he noticed a figure standing at the far end of the corridor near the emergency exit. The man was elderly, wearing hospital pajamas, and standing completely still, facing the wall. Thomas assumed it was a confused resident who had wandered from their room, something that happened occasionally with patients suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's. He approached the man calmly, speaking in a gentle voice. "Sir, can I help you get back to your room? It's very late." The man didn't respond. He didn't even move. Thomas got closer and reached out to touch the man's shoulder. His hand passed right through the figure, as if it were made of mist. Thomas jerked his hand back, his mind struggling to process what just happened. Before he could react further, the figure slowly turned around. The man's face was gray and sunken, his eyes hollow and dark. His mouth moved as if he were trying to speak, but no sound came out. He raised one skeletal hand and pointed down the hallway toward room 114. Then he vanished, simply ceased to exist. Thomas stood alone in the hallway, his heart hammering in his chest, his rational mind fighting against what he'd just witnessed. Trying to shake off the encounter, Thomas forced himself to continue his rounds. When he reached room 114, the room the phantom had pointed to, he decided to check on the resident, Mr. James Peterson, an 87-year-old man recovering from pneumonia. Thomas quietly opened the door and immediately knew something was wrong. Mr. Peterson was struggling to breathe, his oxygen levels dangerously low. Thomas quickly called for help, and the medical team was able to stabilize Mr. Peterson before his condition became critical. If Thomas hadn't checked on him at that exact moment, Mr. Peterson likely wouldn't have survived the night. Over the following weeks, Thomas saw the phantom man 6 more times. Each time the figure would appear in the hallway, point to a specific room, and vanish. And each time, Thomas would find a resident in that room experiencing a medical emergency, a stroke, cardiac arrest, or severe respiratory distress.
The phantom was warning him, guiding him to patients who needed immediate help. Thomas did some research and discovered something chilling. 15 years earlier, a night shift nurse named Harold Mitchell had worked at St. Augustine's. Harold been beloved by staff and residents alike, known for his uncanny ability to sense when a patient was in trouble before any alarms went off. He would often say he could feel when someone needed him. Harold had died of a heart attack in the very hallway where Thomas kept seeing the phantom, right in front of the emergency exit. He had been rushing to help a patient when he collapsed. Thomas came to believe that Harold had never truly left St. Augustine's. His spirit remained, still watching over the residents, still trying to save lives, even in death. The phantom was Harold Mitchell, forever on duty, forever caring for those who couldn't care for themselves. Thomas no longer fears the hallway visitor. Instead, he's learned to trust him, and more than once, that trust has saved a life. Story 3, Room 13. Jennifer Ramirez worked at Sunset Hills Nursing Home in Oregon, a facility with a troubling reputation. The staff whispered about Room 13, a room that seemed to have a dark presence. Residents placed in that room rarely lasted more than a few weeks, and those who did often reported seeing shadowy figures and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. Jennifer didn't believe in ghosts or curses. She was a woman of science, trained to deal with facts and medical realities. When she was assigned to the wing containing Room 13, she dismissed the warnings from other nurses as superstition. Her first night on that wing, everything seemed normal. Room 13's current resident, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, was a sweet 92-year-old woman with mild dementia but relatively good health. Jennifer checked on her several times throughout the night, and Mrs. Chen seemed comfortable and content. At 4 a.m., Jennifer was documenting patient notes when she heard a sound coming from Room 13, a low, guttural whisper that made the hair on her arm stand up. She hurried to the room and found Mrs. Chen sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, staring at the corner of the room. "He's here," Mrs. Chen whispered. "The man in black. He says it's time. He says I have to go with him." Jennifer followed Mrs. Chen's gaze to the corner, but saw nothing. She tried to comfort the elderly woman, explaining it was just a dream, that everything was fine. But Mrs. Chen became increasingly agitated, insisting the man was real, that he was reaching for her, that she didn't want to go. Then the temperature in the room dropped dramatically. She could see her own breath, foggy in the suddenly frigid air. The lights began to flicker, and she heard it, a voice, deep and cold, speaking words in a language she didn't recognize. Mrs. Chen let out a terrified scream and collapsed back onto her pillow. She checked her vitals and found her heart rate had spiked dangerously high. She called for emergency assistance, and the medical team was able to stabilize Mr. Chen before his condition became critical. Jennifer demanded to know the history of Room 13. The facility administrator reluctantly revealed that the building had once been a psychiatric hospital in the 1950s. Room 13 had been an isolation room where particularly violent or disturbed patients were kept. One patient, a man convicted of multiple murders who had been declared criminally insane, had died in that very room under mysterious circumstances. His death had never been fully explained, but staff at the time reported hearing screams and seeing strange shadows in the days leading up to his death. Since the building's conversion to a nursing home, Room 13 had seen an unusually high mortality rate.
Residents who were placed there often reported the same thing Mrs. Chen described, a dark figure that appeared to them just before they died. Mrs. Chen passed away 3 days later, never having regained consciousness. Jennifer refused to work on that wing again. She later learned that Sunset Hills had decided to permanently close Room 13, converting it to storage space. But nurses still report hearing whispers and seeing shadows near that locked door. Some rooms, it seems, hold darkness that can't be exorcised. Some presences refuse to leave, claiming the souls of the vulnerable as they always have. Room 13 remains locked, but locks can't contain everything. Some doors should never be opened. Some rooms should never be entered.
Story 4: The Last Visitor. Our final story comes from night shift nurse Patricia O'Brien, who worked at Riverside Care Center in Massachusetts. Patricia specialized in end-of-life care and had sat with countless patients during their final hours. She had witnessed many peaceful passings and had come to view death not as something to fear, but as a natural transition. But one night, everything she believed about death and what lies beyond. She was caring for Mr. Robert Harrison, a 94-year-old former school teacher who was in his final days. Robert had no living family. His wife had passed decades earlier, his children were gone, and he had outlived most of his friends. Patricia had grown fond of Robert during his time at Riverside. He was kind, intelligent, and faced his approaching death with remarkable grace. On what would be Robert's last night, Patricia sat beside his bed, holding his frail hand as his breathing became more labored. It was around 2 a.m. when she noticed something strange. Robert, who had been barely conscious for days, suddenly opened his eyes wide and smiled, a beautiful, radiant smile she'd never seen before. "She's here," he whispered. "My Margaret. She's come for me at last." Patricia looked around the room but saw no one. Yet Robert was clearly seeing something or someone that brought him profound joy. His eyes tracked movement across the room, and he reached out his free hand as if to touch someone. "I've missed you so much, darling," Robert said, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. "I've been so lonely without you." Then Patricia felt it, a presence in the room, warm and comforting. The air seemed to shimmer near Robert's bedside, and for just a moment she could have sworn she saw the translucent figure of a woman standing there, beautiful and glowing with a soft light. The woman was smiling down at Robert with infinite love and tenderness. "Is it really time?" Robert asked, his voice growing weaker. "Can I come home now?" Patricia watched in awe as Robert's entire demeanor changed. The pain and weariness that had marked his final days seemed to melt away. He looked peaceful, even happy. He squeezed Patricia's hand gently. "Thank you for being here with me," he told her, "but I'm not alone anymore. She's taking me home." Robert took one more breath, smiled that beautiful smile again, and then he was gone, peacefully, gently, surrounded by love, even if that love came from beyond the veil between worlds. Patricia sat there for a long time, still holding his hand, feeling the presence of something holy and profound in that room. She had witnessed many deaths, but this one was different. This one showed her that perhaps death isn't an ending, but a reunion. That perhaps those we love are waiting for us on the other side, ready to guide us home when our time comes. After that night, Patricia approached her work with renewed purpose. She no longer saw herself as just a nurse caring for the dying. She saw herself as a guardian who keeps watch until the true guides arrive, the loved ones who come to lead souls to whatever lies beyond. She still works the night shift at Riverside, and sometimes in those quiet early morning hours when patients are transitioning from this world to the next, she sees them, the visitors who come to collect their loved ones. Husbands, wives, parents, children, friends, all returning to ensure that no one dies alone, that everyone has someone to take their hand and lead them home. These visitors come in love, not fear. They come to comfort, not to terrorize, and Patricia considers it a privilege to witness these reunions, these moments when the living and the dead briefly touch, when love proves itself stronger than death. 4 stories, 4 nurses, 4 encounters with the unexplainable reality that just exists beyond the edge of our everyday world. These nursing home night shift workers didn't ask to see what they saw. They didn't seek out the paranormal. They were simply doing their jobs, caring for the vulnerable, watching over those in their final days and hours. But in those quiet, dark hours, when the world sleeps, they discovered that the boundary between life and death is thinner than we imagine. Some spirits remain because they're confused, like Mrs. Hartley, waiting for closure they don't remember receiving. Some stay to help, like Harold Mitchell, forever protecting those he cared for in life. Some presences are darker, claiming room and spaces as their own, feeding on fear, like the entity in room 13. And some come from beyond out of love, like Robert Harrison's wife Margaret, proving that the bonds we form in life cannot be broken by something as simple as death. The next time you walk past a nursing home late at night, remember these stories. Remember that inside those walls, night shift workers are witnessing things that medical textbooks cannot explain. They're seeing proof that death is not the end, that something, whatever we choose to call it, continues after our hearts stop beating. This has been Mr. Shadow's Stories, and I want to thank you for joining me in the darkness tonight. If these true encounters have sent chills down your spine, if they've made you question what you thought you knew about life and death, then I've done my job. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because every week I bring you new true horror stories from the shadows of our reality. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an encounter with the unexplainable. Leave a comment below telling me about your own experiences. Have you ever worked a night shift where something unexplainable happened? Have you witnessed something that science couldn't explain? Share this video with someone brave enough to listen, but maybe don't watch it alone next time. Until we meet again in the shadows, remember, death is not always the end. Sometimes it's just a different kind of beginning. Sometimes those who've passed are closer than we think, watching over us, waiting for us, or perhaps still walking the same halls they did in life. Sleep well, if you can. This is Mr. Shadow's signing off. The darkness is always waiting, and I am too.